Welcome to Heartline Stories, where ordinary moments take extraordinary turns. Today's story follows Harper, a young girl with a big heart, who lent a stranger her last $2 at a bus stop. But what she didn't know was how that small act of kindness would spark a chain of incredible events. What was hidden inside a mysterious chest? And how could following a map of stars change her life forever? Stay tuned and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Heartline Stories for more exciting tales. One sunny afternoon in a busy town, a girl named Harper sat by the bus stop, swinging her feet and humming a cheerful tune. Harper was 11 years old with bright red hair and a backpack full of books. She loved reading stories about heroes and adventures. Suddenly, a man ran towards the bus stop. He looked worried. His name was Caleb. Caleb wore a worn-out jacket and had a kind face, but his eyes seemed tired. He patted his pockets frantically, searching for something. "Are you okay, mister?" Harper asked, tilting her head. Caleb sighed. "Oh, I left my wallet at home, and I need to catch this bus to get to an important meeting. I don't know what to do." Harper thought for a moment. She opened her little purse, which had a few coins jingling inside. "How much is the bus fare?" "Just $2, Caleb said, looking embarrassed. "But I can't ask you to." Before he could finish, Harper smiled and handed him two shiny coins. "Here you go. You can pay me back whenever." Caleb's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you so much. I promise I won't forget this kindness." The bus arrived and Caleb waved as he climbed on. Harper watched it disappear down the street, feeling a little proud. She liked helping people, even strangers. Days passed and Harper forgot about the man with the worn-out jacket. But one morning, as she was eating her cereal, there was a knock at the door. Harper's mom opened it, and there stood Caleb, now dressed in a sharp suit. He held a shiny black briefcase. "Is Harper here?" he asked, smiling warmly. Harper peeked out from behind her mom. "Mr. Caleb?" "That's me," Caleb chuckled. "I told you I wouldn't forget. You have no idea how much your kindness meant to me that day." Caleb knelt down so he could talk to Harper face to face. His black briefcase gleamed under the sunlight, and Harper couldn't help but stare at it, her imagination running wild. Was it filled with gold coins, treasure maps, maybe even a secret invention? "I promised I'd come back," Caleb began, his voice warm and steady. "You see, the day you lent me those $2, you didn't just help me catch the bus. You helped me make it to the most important meeting of my life." Harper's eyes widened. "What kind of meeting?" "A business meeting," Caleb explained. "I was pitching an idea for a new project I'd been working on for years. And guess what? They loved it. That meeting changed everything for me." Harper tilted her head. "So, did you become rich?" Caleb chuckled. "You could say that, but more importantly, I never forgot how your kindness got me there. That's why I brought this." He placed the briefcase gently on the table in the living room. Harper's mom, curious but cautious, stood nearby. "What's in there?" Harper asked, her voice filled with anticipation. Caleb smiled mysteriously. "Open it and see for yourself." With a mix of excitement and nervousness, Harper unlatched the briefcase. Inside, she saw a stack of papers, neatly arranged and a small card on top. She frowned slightly. Papers? That's not what she had imagined. "What is this?" she asked, picking up the card. Caleb grinned. "Those papers are something very special. They're the start of a surprise, something I've been planning for you ever since that day at the bus stop. But you'll need to read that card first to understand." Harper held the card carefully, her fingers trembling with excitement. Her mom leaned closer, just as curious as she was. The card read, "To Harper, the little girl with the biggest heart, this is just the beginning of something amazing. Thank you for being you." "What does it mean?" Harper asked, looking up at Caleb with wide eyes. "Well," Caleb said, leaning in as if to share a big secret, "those papers might just lead to an adventure you'll never forget. But I can't reveal everything all at once, can I?" He winked. Harper's curiosity was bubbling over, her eyes darting between the mysterious papers and Caleb. "An adventure?" she repeated, her voice tinged with excitement. "What kind of adventure?" Caleb leaned back with a knowing smile. "The kind that starts with this." He carefully pulled out one of the papers from the stack and laid it on the table. Harper squinted at it. The paper had a drawing of a large building, a library, but not just any library. It looked magical. The windows sparkled and tiny symbols were etched on the door. Beneath the drawing in bold letters, it read, "The treasure awaits." Harper gasped. "A treasure? Like real treasure?" Caleb nodded. "Real enough. But this isn't about gold or jewels. It's something even more valuable. But to find it, you'll need courage, a sharp mind, and—" He tapped the paper. "This map." Harper's mom raised an eyebrow. "Is this some kind of game?" she asked, half skeptical, half intrigued. Caleb grinned. "Let's just say it's more than a game. Harper's kindness set all this into motion, and now it's her turn to be part of something incredible." Harper's heart raced. "When do we start? Can we go now?" "Not so fast," Caleb said with a chuckle. "The first step isn't in the library. It's somewhere closer." He pulled out another paper from the briefcase. This one was blank except for a single riddle written in elegant handwriting. "I guard the words, both old and new. I'm filled with tales, and I'm waiting for you. Find the one who holds the key, and there your next clue will be." Harper bit her lip, thinking hard. "Is it a library? Books? Wait, a librarian?" Caleb clapped his hands. "Exactly. But which librarian? That's up to you to figure out." Harper paced back and forth in her living room, gripping the riddle tightly in her hands. "Which librarian?" she murmured to herself, her mind racing. She thought about the two libraries she loved visiting. One was a big public library downtown, and the other was a small, cozy one near her school. Both had friendly librarians who always smiled when they saw her. Caleb watched her with an amused expression. "It seems like you already have a couple of ideas. Trust your instincts," he said, leaning back in his chair. Harper stopped pacing and looked at Caleb. "It has to be the one near my school," she said confidently. "That librarian, Mrs. Langley, always says she's a keeper of secrets when she talks about books." Caleb raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "That sounds like a great place to start." Harper's mom grabbed her jacket from the closet. "I guess we're heading to the library then, aren't we?" she said with a smile. Harper's heart thumped as they walked to the small library by her school. When they entered, the familiar scent of old books greeted her. Behind the desk sat Mrs. Langley, her round glasses perched on her nose, and her gray hair tied up in a neat bun. "Hello, Harper. What brings you here today?" Mrs. Langley asked warmly. Harper took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding up the riddle. "Mrs. Langley, I think you might have the next clue to my adventure." Mrs. Langley adjusted her glasses and read the riddle aloud. A smile spread across her face. "Ah, so it's finally time," she said, her eyes twinkling with a secret only she knew. Harper's jaw dropped. You know what this is about?" Mrs. Langley nodded and stood up. "Follow me," she said, beckoning Harper, her mom, and Caleb to follow. She led them to the back of the library where a tall shelf of books stood. Mrs. Langley tapped the side of the shelf, and to Harper's astonishment, it creaked and slid open, revealing a hidden room. Inside the room, the walls were lined with old maps, strange gadgets, and shelves of scrolls. In the center of the room sat a dusty wooden chest with a lock shaped like a star. "This," Mrs. Langley said, gesturing to the chest, "is what you're looking for." Harper's eyes widened as she stared at the mysterious chest. "What's inside?" she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Ah, that's for you to discover," Mrs. Langley said with a knowing smile. "But you'll need a key to open it." Harper turned to Caleb, who shrugged. "Don't look at me," he said. "The adventure's yours now." Harper stared at the chest with wide eyes, her fingers itching to unlock it. The star-shaped lock gleamed under the faint light of the hidden room, almost as if it were calling to her. "But where is the key?" she asked, her voice a mix of wonder and urgency. Mrs. Langley chuckled softly and folded her hands. "The key is not far, Harper. But to find it, you'll need to solve another clue. Think carefully. Adventures like this are about using your mind as much as your heart." Harper turned to Caleb, hoping he might offer some help, but he simply gave her a playful shrug. "You're the hero of this story, Harper. I'm just along for the ride." As Harper looked back at the chest, Mrs. Langley handed her another folded piece of paper. "This riddle," she said, "will lead you to the key." Harper unfolded the paper with trembling hands and read aloud. "I'm part of the past, yet I light the way. I hang up high, but am not the son of day. Find me, and the key you'll gain. But beware, the answer's plain." Harper tilted her head, reading the riddle again. Her mom stepped closer and said gently, "It sounds like something that gives light. Maybe a lamp?" Harper's eyes lit up. "Or a lantern." She glanced around the secret room and noticed several antique lanterns hanging on hooks along the walls. Each one looked dusty and old, but one near the far corner had a faint golden glint to it. Without hesitation, Harper walked over and reached up to grab the lantern. It was surprisingly light in her hands. As she turned it over, she spotted a small carved star on the bottom. Her heart leapt. "This has to be it!" she exclaimed. Mrs. Langley smiled but said nothing, watching as Harper carefully opened the lantern's tiny door. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion, was a golden key shaped exactly like the star on the chest's lock. "I found it!" Harper shouted, holding the key up high. "Well done, Harper," Caleb said, clapping softly. "But be ready. The real adventure begins once you open that chest." Harper's mom placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Harper nodded, gripping the key tightly. She returned to the chest and, with a deep breath, slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. Slowly she turned it, and with a faint click, the chest creaked open. But what Harper saw inside wasn't treasure, at least not the kind she expected. Instead, there were layers of strange objects, a folded map, a small notebook, and a crystal orb that shimmered with colors she couldn't even name. "What is all this?" Harper whispered, her voice trembling with excitement and confusion. Caleb leaned in, his expression serious now. "These," he said, pointing at the items, "are tools. Tools you'll need for the journey ahead. The map will guide you, the notebook will reveal secrets, and the orb—" He paused, his voice dropping to a mysterious tone. "Well, the orb will show you things you can't see with your eyes alone." Harper's heart raced. She wanted to ask 100 questions, but before she could, Mrs. Langley chimed in. Choose your first move wisely, Harper. Every decision you make will shape the path ahead. Harper picked up the notebook and flipped through its pages. The words inside seemed to shift and swirl, almost as if they were alive. One phrase stood out, glowing faintly. Follow the stars, and the truth will be revealed. Harper looked up at Caleb and Mrs. Langley. What stars? What truth? She asked, her voice firm and filled with determination. Mrs. Langley simply smiled, while Caleb gave her a reassuring nod. That, he said, is for you to discover. Harper carefully placed the notebook back into the chest, her fingers lingering on its strange, shifting cover. She glanced at the map next, unfolding it slowly. The paper felt crisp but ancient, as though it held secrets long buried. The map wasn't of the library or even the town. It was of the night sky, dotted with constellations. But one constellation glowed brighter than the others, marked with a tiny star symbol that seemed to pulse faintly. The star, Harper whispered. The notebook said to follow the stars. Mrs. Langley nodded knowingly, her eyes sparkling. This map will lead you to your next destination, Harper. But remember, the path may not be as simple as it seems. Harper squinted at the glowing constellation. But how do I follow the stars? They're in the sky, and it's daytime. She looked up at Caleb, hoping he might have an answer. Caleb grinned and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small golden compass. But this wasn't an ordinary compass. It had tiny glowing dots on its surface, almost like miniature constellations. This, he said, handing it to Harper, is the Starfinder. It'll guide you to where you need to go, no matter the time of day. Harper held the compass carefully, watching as the glowing dots shifted and aligned themselves with the constellation on the map. A tiny arrow appeared, pointing towards the library door. Her heart raced with anticipation. "We're leaving already?" her mom asked, glancing at Mrs. Langley. "Shouldn't she take a moment to figure all this out first?" But Harper shook her head firmly. "No, I want to see where this goes. I want to know what the stars are leading me to." Mrs. Langley stepped closer, her voice soft but serious. "Be brave, Harper. And trust the journey. Sometimes the answers you're looking for come when you least expect them." Harper nodded and tucked the compass into her pocket. She slung her backpack over her shoulder, ready for whatever lay ahead. Caleb opened the library door, and as they stepped outside, Harper noticed something strange. The air felt different, crisper, cooler. The world around her seemed brighter, almost sparkling, as if the stars themselves had come down to watch her journey. The compass arrow shifted slightly, pointing down the street toward the park. Harper's mom hesitated but followed as Harper took confident steps forward, her eyes glowing with determination. As they reached the edge of the park, Harper noticed something unusual. In the middle of the grassy field, there stood an old towering oak tree. Its branches twisted and stretched toward the sky, and hanging from one of its limbs was a faintly glowing lantern, just like the ones in the library's secret room. Harper's breath caught. I think that's where we're supposed to go next," she said, gripping the compass tightly. Caleb stood back, watching her with a small, encouraging smile. "This is your adventure, Harper. Go see what's waiting for you." Harper walked slowly towards the oak tree, her heart thumping in her chest. As she got closer, she noticed an inscription carved into the trunk. The words were faded but just readable. "The heart of the tree holds the key." Harper reached out her hand, brushing her fingers against the rough bark. The tree seemed to hum faintly under her touch, as though it was alive and waiting for her to uncover its secret. Harper's fingers brushed against the inscription, and she hesitated for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed her hand firmly against the heart of the tree. There was a low, resonating hum, and the bark under her palm began to shift in part, revealing a hidden compartment within the trunk. Inside was a small velvet pouch. Harper carefully pulled it out and opened it, finding yet another key, this one engraved with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer faintly in the sunlight. Alongside it was a small, folded note. Harper unfolded the note eagerly and read, "This key unlocks the final door to the truth you seek. Follow the compass once more, and all will be revealed." She turned to Caleb and Mrs. Langley, who both smiled knowingly. Harper's mom placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've come so far, sweetheart. This has been amazing to watch." Harper held the key tightly and checked the compass again. This time the arrow pointed towards the horizon. The journey wasn't over yet, but Harper felt braver, stronger, and more excited than ever. She looked at Caleb with a grin. "Let's go. I'm ready to see where this ends." As the group set off together, Harper felt a deep sense of wonder, knowing that her act of kindness had led her down a path she could never have imagined. The adventure wasn't just about treasure, it was about discovery, courage, and the incredible possibilities that lay ahead. And so, Harper's story continued, her journey far from over, as the glow of the stars in the compass guided her toward whatever lay beyond the horizon.